Lea, thank you very much for the kind introduction. There's not much more for me to say at this point, so I'm happy to invite all my panelists on stage as well. I have with me Franziska Brecht, who is the Chief Data Scientist at the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. Franziska, welcome on stage. I also have Bettina Görner, who is the Chief Data Officer at ETERNO Health. I have Goergmaier, Vice President, Enterprise Platforms and Services Data AI at BMW Group, who you have seen speaking before, as well as, last but not least, Maximilian, Senior Director, Business Transformation and EMEA Lead at Dataiku. Welcome to all of you. Wonderful. So I think a short introduction has been made. We want to look at data products. What is a data product? We've written about this in the past, but I have 4 experts with me who know much more about this than I do. How do we use them? How widespread are they in the German economy at this point? And how does all of this link to AI, obviously? And then maybe also what could the future look like when it comes to data products? Maybe as a first easy round, it makes sense for you to introduce yourself, because this is what you can do much better than I can. Bettina, why don't you want to start? How did you come to the role that you're in right now? And maybe which sector do you focus on and why?
Thank you. Yes, I focus on healthcare life sciences ever since I was born, kind of. I'm a molecular biologist by training and have been building data products for healthcare life sciences for the last 17 years. Currently Chief Data Officer at ETERNO, that's a health tech company here out of Berlin. Previously looked after genomics data, material science data, always with customers being healthcare professionals and R&D professionals.
Maximilian, next, please.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So my educational background is in statistics and economics. Before joining Dataiku in 2020, I worked at Roland Berger, advising mostly the regulated sectors such as public sector, life science sector, etc. At Roland Berger, I lead a team of sort of strategic advisors. They make up a background with management consultants plus a tech background, and we advise our clients on challenges around operating model, data products, identifying the right use cases, and also quantifying sort of the value out of these use cases.
Perfect, thank you. Next to Franziska.
Franziska Brecht. My training is mostly in statistics and information systems. I've been working in cybersecurity and data science, mostly in the automotive sector. And then in 2022, I got offered the opportunity to build up a data lab at the Federal Ministry for Economics and at the time climate change, so now it's energy, which was part of the federal data strategy, which states that all federal ministries should build up a data lab so we can work more evidence-based. So I've been doing this for 4 years now. Yeah.
Cool. And Marco, last but not least.
Yeah, I have a strong automotive background. They're heavily been involved in our platform ecosystem, first in the cloud, then in the data platforms, and now I oversee our global enterprise platform, data and AI. Organization, and we, as I presented earlier, we really try to drive the adoption of data and AI across the company.
It's very impressive. Thank you, all of you. Maybe to kick this off, because we titled this data products. I've had a few conversations already before today, and some people, they're aware of data products, some people are not yet. So maybe I would be curious if you have what it means for you, what this concept can mean, because I think there's not just one answer to this. Who wants to go first?
Happy to go. Sure. So in my view, a data product is a digital product that has data at its heart. It can be something simple as a dashboard, can be a data feed, can be an API, can be all the way to a machine learning model. It can have an internal audience, or an external audience. It can be rule-based, statistics-based, or AI-based. So you see it's quite a broad concept. But if you're passionate about AI and data, that's the most obvious way to monetize data in my personal view.
Maybe I can add to that, because we always have that same discussion as at our data lab, because we're a data lab, so by definition we don't really offer data products. So I think for data product you need the underlying processes for validation, for updating, for maintenance, and also for user support. So we, as a relatively small data lab at the ministry, we don't have that kind of resources. We are not set up to maintain data products, so that's always our internal discussion, so I know all about the processes.
And maybe to add to that as well, so for me, a data product can be everything, as you just mentioned. It's the way you treat it, right? Do you treat it with the value, downstream value in mind? Do you treat it with reuse and how you sort of monetize that? So all of these aspects, I think, make it a data product. But it can be, underneath it can be everything about. It can be a table, it can be a machine learning model, it can be a vector store. It's really about how to treat this as a data product.
Yeah, I think just adding two things probably. One is really quality assurance. I love to highlight that because specifically from the automotive sector, when I look at production, this is really critical for us. And that's also when it moves, a data product really moves away from the technology view only. Because if you scan a wrong part in production, you cannot fix that later on. Yeah? So that's really, so you have processes that support data quality. I think that's one thing. And the second thing I would add is a life cycle. You need a real life cycle management for a data product, whatever it is, opposed to, let's say, a one-off report you have probably.
Interesting. Thank you, all of you. I think, I don't think I should add to this, but I think maybe we should take a step back, at the beginning before we again dive deeper into data products and understand what are examples of these and how you can scale them inside the organization. We should talk about data availability maybe briefly and try to understand a bit better what type or like level of data availability you have found in the organizations that you work with or that you work for most of the time. Marco, maybe I start with you because we've seen this earlier in your presentation already. You've mentioned the platform that you have running. So it's, I imagine it's connected to it's connected to different organizations, to different sub entities and silos and these kind of things. How was it to build it? How easy is it to plug in new data sources? Is this something that now happens automatically? How do you kind of have this one, I assume, central place?
Yeah. So I think it's something that took quite a lot of time. So to be very honest, I mean, we started in 2015. Building up our, back then still called big data platform, and then it evolved over time, of course. And I think the approach we've chosen is a platform approach, but also a use case-based approach. Yeah? So we really try to provide incentives in the company to start off with use cases. So what is the added business value actually I will provide? And then coming from this, what is the data I need to leverage this use case? Yeah? And that's then basically where you decide, okay, what are the source systems I need to connect? And also this evolved over time. I think the first connections, these were really one-off connections. Now, of course, we have automated implementation frameworks. It's very easy to connect to different technology stacks. You have good standardization. And so over time, you grow the assets. We call them data assets, not data products. And then you, of course, also can reuse more and more of those data products or data assets in other use cases as well.
I see. Franziska, I will now ask you, because you work in the public sector organization. Public sector organizations generally always have the reputation that data availability is difficult, but maybe it's not. So how was it for you when you started there, and maybe also how did it develop over time? Do you have access to all the data in the federal ministry?
Well, we do have obviously a lot of data, and access is difficult. I think what you read most in the press is that data is siloed, meaning you can't technically access the data because there's no standard API. We also have other issues such as data governance issues. For example, there's no role defined. You talked earlier about those roles, about data stewards, data owners. And then we have data quality issues. There might be missing data, no metadata. So there's a lot of issues. I think you got the whole package of data governance that we need to address. But as a data lab, that's really one of our main focal points to make that data available.
I see. Bettina, how is it at your organization? Was it easy to have like a broad and kind of omnipresent access to data that you have?
That was in fact easy because my last two companies I was appointed chief data officer for were tech companies on a cloud stack. So data availability was not the limiting factor. Since this is healthcare, regulatory and compliance and legal is a huge topic you first need to comb through to really understand whose data is it, what are you actually allowed. Second was then really subject matter expertise, because if you're looking at genomics data, a few genomist people understand it, but the techies and data scientists usually don't. And then thirdly, the business value, right? I mean, data products are called products or assets for a reason. You need product market fit and you need customers, whether that's internal or external. So that means you should bet on things where you find usage and adoption, like you have shown earlier. And those were the things we had to focus on instead of data availability.
I see. Now, Maximilian, looking at you, because now we've seen different levels of maturity, at least over the history, so the organizations can start at different points. Now, when you speak with clients, for example, how do you, again, maybe what is the average data maturity that you find, and then also how do you measure it?
Good question. I would probably extend it to data and AI maturity, right? Again, to me, it all starts with what are you trying to achieve with that data and AI. AI and data, Gen AI, agents are just a technology, right? In the end, you want to drive business outcomes. So the question is, how well do they tie, whatever you do on the data level, how well do they tie into the strategic objectives you have? If they are totally discoupled, and I ask a head of data science, what are you actually trying to achieve here? And it is about bringing 5 more models into production, then that's probably the wrong answer. It's more about, okay, what business outcome do I try to achieve? We also look at the organizational setup. I think most organizations are now in some sort of hub and spoke model, maybe pivoting into some sort of data mesh model, which is closely linked to those data products. We also look at the governance. So who has, you mentioned data steward, what are the responsibilities? I think GE Aviation is a great client example of ours. They started off in 2018, so not 2015, but 2018, so pretty long road. And they established these data stewards centrally, but left ownership of the data products in the domains. And only after it reached a certain level of maturity or usage, I think 50 or 100 use cases pulling from that data product, then centralized it, and then centrally sort of governed that data product. And the last one I would argue is sort of people. What kind of people strategy do you have? Do you have a data expert first people strategy? Or do you have sort of a strategy that combines both subject matter experts and data experts?
This is interesting. You're already hinting at the governance that we will touch on later. And also maybe because since we're already speaking of this, because I imagine there needs to be, because it's something you touched on when you spoke about this hub and spoke model, there needs to be a feedback loop, you could say, between data management, data engineering teams, and then these data product, data assets teams that are maybe more use case focused, that can have domain expertise, not necessarily maybe. How do you build these teams? Because they're probably not there always, like you mentioned maybe there's a people strategy, there's a data strategy, these kind of things. How do you bring these people together? Is it is it use case based, or do you have different spokes that interact? Like, how can I imagine this kind of flow when we start with the database or like the source, and then we kind of find our way slowly to a product that I could click in the catalog?
So again, starting from the sort of business problem and use cases.
Okay.
I think historically most organizations started off very centrally with a data science, data expert first approach, and then quickly realized that the backlog of use cases piled up, and the use cases that they actually built didn't make it into prod, or they made it into prod, but then people don't use it in the business. And it's typically because they haven't been involved, they don't trust the data products, be it a machine learning model or be it a dashboard. So they quickly come to realize we actually build the best use cases in terms of business impact and adoption if we bring together data scientists and subject matter experts. And I think there are some subject matter experts that are more likely to pick this up and be involved. We see that with our clients, typically process or quality engineers, because they already work with data, they have a sort of data background, actuaries, for instance, but also people like financial analysts or marketing analysts who work with data daily. These are typically personas that are more inclined or more open to get involved and build those use cases in a collaborative fashion with the data scientist.
I see. Okay, so this is nice, because now we already kind of moved to use cases, and so I asked all three others of you, how do you even identify them? Because Marco, I've seen in your presentation earlier that you have a lot of use cases, and I assume that there were even more use cases initially submitted to this whole list of things that we would like to do. How do you prioritize? Who do you disappoint? Who do you how do you handle this? I assume it's very political. If you want to elaborate on this as well, yeah. And then I have the same question, of course, to Bettina and Franziska too.
Yeah. So. Of course, in the beginning, you always try to have the right incentive model. Yeah? So, and for us, one incentive model, for example, we created what we call match fund. It was centrally sponsored by our CFO. So it's really a budget bucket where you could apply for with the use case. Yeah? Depending on the return on investment, we saw in the use case you could apply, and then you would get 50% financed out of this bucket. 50% of the budget would need to come from yourself. That's when you really need a financing. And of course, you're free to implement your own use case if you have the resources and can do that. And I think that already leads to a natural selection, because as a company, you will only choose the use cases where you see the best return on investment. Of course, you disappoint a lot of people with this approach, because not everybody can win. And I think this model works quite well. We still have it in place today, also for our AI use cases, and we see that this is really a good enabler for all the teams. But we also have problems in the incentive model, to be very honest. For example, if you own a data product and you're very successful, then you will have a lot of usage and reusage of your data product, which creates costs in the cloud. And we haven't found a solution for that, because we have an end-to-end ownership for our products or assets. So you're accountable for the costs. And so speaking of incentive models, we also need to tweak and optimize all the time. And of course, we try to adjust those
So
things.
it's like I get punished if I made a good data product, you say.
Exactly. So we find solutions for that, and of course, but it's a problem, yeah? Specifically for smaller products who don't have the financing inside of the company.
Interesting.
So we obviously don't disappoint the minister. So the ministers ask for something, we do it. But it's actually a pretty straightforward approach. So we get approached by our customers, which are internal departments in our ministry. And then we prioritize based on technical feasibility, number of users, impact. But it's really difficult to measure impact. I guess it's already difficult for you to measure like a return on investment. It's even harder for us because we don't have really, it's very hard to measure our output. Like, how do you measure the output of a ministry? Do you measure the number of policies we publish? Or that's a very hard thing to do. So we're constantly working on that. But at the end, it's more or less like a priority matrix.
Bettina, I assume that you maybe don't have such a sophisticated cost accounting, cost center approach in a startup, but maybe I'm wrong.
You're completely right. I think this works very well in a big corporation, right? In a small and medium enterprise where I'm active, also as an advisor, we are usually very pragmatic looking at supply and demand, right? Supply, what data do we have at our fingertips available? You talked about feasibility. And that what kind of questions are around which are a pain and need solving. And ideally those questions, this demand is not only from internal stakeholders, but you also find a way to directly or indirectly serve your customers of your primary business with that. And then after I've collected both, right, I try to score that and align that with the company's strategic priorities. And then it's usually straightforward to prioritize, and then we also build that in that core data group, right? So no co-funding model at this stage, but then that starts the really interesting part, and that is adoption and success and feedback, right? You need feedback in terms of, is this right or wrong? Is the feature scope correct? But you want to give feedback all the way back to data acquisition. Because if you realize that your machine learning model predicts something the wrong way because you are capturing data in the wrong way, well, then you need to, adjust at the start. And that's why data product management or lifecycle management is so important. As I say, it's called product for a reason, and it's not easy. And really looking at this holistic part when prioritizing, when delivering, and when refining has helped us.
Interesting. I think this maybe we can briefly link this already to the data product concept that we started with, in the sense that when we wrote our guideline regarding data products and what they mean, there is sometimes a bit of a tension, at least something that you want to look at, between what is a product and what is a service, and how do you integrate this whole lifecycle idea into this idea of a product that seems like a physical one-off concept, but it's more than that. So how do you you need to have a bit of a broader understanding what is a product to have this whole lifecycle idea integrated. I think this is something that we found interesting and important to have.
Yeah, I think when you come with a software mindset, this is way more natural, right? I mean, it's build, measure, learn, it's continuous improvement, expansion, upsell, etc. But yeah, you're right. If you are thinking in physical products, then it needs a little bit of a shift.
Interesting. Interesting. So now we've seen that there's the different approaches how to identify use cases. There's also different maturities that organizations can have. There needs to be data catalog. There needs to be kind of a front-to-end kind of communication channel that also goes back. That's something we've heard. Now, once you have a higher degree of data maturity, which many here have, all of you have it, what are the issues that you run into then? Because I assume it's not done once you have the catalog and once you have the products in it. You touched on data quality, you touched on quality assurance. There's the lifecycle issue that we've touched upon already. Is there anything else that is difficult? I've heard something about the kind of demonstrating the kind of return on investment, sometimes demonstrating that this is a viable and useful thing to do. What are other things that maybe you have encountered that are?
I think measuring value is a big topic. I think it's becoming an increasingly big topic because organizations have invested in a huge tech stack and trying to consolidate and trying to really understand what are the returns on my investments. If you probably, if you really want to measure the impact of your data products, or that can be a machine learning model or dashboard, etc., you would probably need to do randomized controlled trials, but no one is doing that, right? But at least there is more awareness to do that. And I think a second topic, the rise of agents. I think we're going to talk about this a little bit. The question is not about just putting an agent on an existing process. I think most companies have built an enterprise GPT or something alike. It's really now the challenge is, and that's where the friction is going to come from, is redefining these processes underneath. And this is where people will question what sort of the scope of it or the goal of it. We have many different historic enterprise applications that you need to connect. You don't necessarily want to build or just put all the data that you need into a common data lake, but make sure that sort of the agents you're building build an end-to-end process and touch upon many different enterprise applications and do right back into these enterprise applications. And I think that's sort of what I see with the organizations that now build agents. That's the difficult part, also in terms of authentication, who has access to these enterprise applications. I think you mentioned it in your talk. Yeah. That's, I see a big topic there. Yeah.
So fully agree, and adding to Max's comment, I think what is also a big issue, labeling all the metadata. Whether it is for structured data, when you need to get this in place, it's a crazy amount of work to do. And for unstructured data, challenge is even bigger. So we use Confluence, for example, a lot for documentation, but then you might have various, let's say, life cycles of your documentation. So which one is the right to choose for the LLM? How you make sure that the ones which shouldn't be used are excluded. It's a lot of manual work still. This will also improve with AI, but at this moment in time, it's a huge challenge. Yeah.
I really can't wait to have a higher data maturity because historically in the public administration, we have mainly lawyers and we have economists, and we do have some technical workforce with a good understanding of statistics, but we have a low maturity and we have a low degree of maturity in our technology. So it's very tedious for our users to specify their requirements. They have a very high demand when they come to us asking for business, for some kind of application. and it's very difficult to find out what their requirements are exactly. So I think it will be less frustrating for them to formulate requirements, to adopt new solutions, and it will be much less translation from business requirements into technical requirements. So I'm really hoping that we can accelerate our learning process in the public administration.
Thank you, interesting. Also, I think maybe one thing that now reminds me again of our guideline is just, depending on how we define data products, it can be very hard to measure their impact if the data is part of a different thing. It could be a service, it could be a physical product, and then if it becomes a production factor, it's even more complicated because you can say, well, this is how much we made selling access to a certain dashboard, for example, to simplify. So that makes it even more interesting as a concept. Now let's go into governance. Maybe this is one of the most interesting, most political things when it comes to data. I think I've seen organizations that somehow they distinguish between data governance and then say, like, who takes care of data governance? There's a kind of officer, there's a specialist role for this, and then there's somebody who takes care of individual data products. So there's an end-to-end owner for data product, for each data product. So there's a kind of a hierarchy between these, maybe. And then the data governance people who are also concerned with access to data, they're maybe concerned with compliance, they're concerned with many of these things. There can be a kind of a tension between them and then people who want to build data products. Is this something that you've come across? If yes, how do you address this? Is this an issue, or is it usually the data product people that win and then the governance just adapts to the requirements of the business or the domains? I assume not.
We don't have really clearly defined roles yet, and I would say data governance is really, it's one of my core topics because it's completely underrated. It's slow, it's tedious, it's a lot of work. And it's even underrated by data practitioners from my experience. So everyone wants to do AI products, they're shiny, they promise innovation and value, they promise visibility, but data governance, I mean, if like we are doing work, for example, for our minister, she wants some headlines in the press, we can't make any headlines with data governance projects, right? So it's very challenging to increase the priority of data governance. And when it comes to data products, as I said, we are a data lab. So by definition, we're not developing data products. We're very early on in the life cycle. So we're really trying to work with our users to see what's possible with data, to help them work with data, experience with data, increase awareness, what we can do with data, what are the limitations. And then if we reach a higher degree of maturity, we ideally turn the data application onto a different team that's capable of maintaining, updating with user support, etc.
Is this, yeah?
I would like to add one thing and make a case for analytics maturity and analytics governance, because you asked, right, what did you find when you joined a company? And I mean, when I join a healthcare company, I ask how many patients did you have last year, and 3 people give you 3 different answers, then you know something either with data or with analytics is wrong. And I mean, next to making data governance an enabler and something people smile about rather than hate, I think defining KPIs and agreeing on joint definitions and also making it very normal to talk about how did you calculate this, how did you define this, you know, what does this number in this dashboard really mean? I think that's something that also gets often overlooked, even though it's so obvious. I mean, I remember Deutsche Bahn not able to agree on how many stations they had. Yeah, I mean, that speaks to the problem, and it is relatively easy to fix.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
So agreeing, yeah. So we have a central, which we call data management and governance framework with very much defined roles, and I can only emphasize the importance of KPIs. So we also have defined KPIs for the data quality that you can also see for every asset in our data portal. And that's, of course, you can see the data products who have red flags in there and they have to fix it. And that's then again tied to the incentive model. If you want to apply for money and budget, you also need to make sure that your KPIs your roles, everything is in place. So that helps at least motivating people.
It sounds like it, yes, thank you. We have 10 more minutes, so of course we have to talk about AI now. We want to. Maybe let me be the devil's advocate, and let me be a bit skeptical for the moment. Also here today, tomorrow, there will be a lot of AI-focused, agentic AI-focused presentations, discussions. How much, because you've already touched on the complexity that we add on top of the existing data complexity when it comes to procedures and governance. Like, what is the, like, how many kind of promising, valuable use cases do you see when it comes to kind of medium, short term? Long term, nobody knows. No, long term, maybe we don't need to talk about it anymore. But the short, medium term, of course, maybe it's a valid question. To what extent this comes down to like a 90% data discussion and a 10% agent discussion, or if you see a shift in how much resources do you need to focus on AI? How much kind of use cases that are more concerned with the agentic AI layer than with the data layer? How do you see this going in the next years, maybe? Also, what would you hope to see? This is an open question.
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I guess most of us have seen the recent MIT study about 95% of Gen AI projects failing. And I think we see that at our clients as well. Most clients, as said, do have some sort of enterprise GPT that helps them drive efficiencies, maybe an hour a week, 2 hours a week, etc., which is great. But I think the real potential lies in the use cases that redefine processes, that build an agent on top of enterprise applications. And here again, it's a cost-benefit analysis. I mean, agents leveraging large language models, but also small language models, can create lots of costs. And in some cases, we need to realize that sort of a very basic if-when sort of approach can already fix it, right? So I think there is some hype and there is big potential in agents, but we need to make sure that we not sort of put agents on top of existing processes, but really redefine the processes. And this is going to take time. This is going to take the organizations to really move and rethink maybe even their entire business model and their entire tech stack. So lots of potential, but I think still yet to see sort of really end-to-end agents. What we currently see are agents being built in specific domains. Roche is a great example. You mentioned lawyers. Lots of patent lawyers, they build their own agent with our platform for 500 or so patents to build up or prepare court appeals for their patents, which is great. But again, it's only the sort of their domain. It not yet stretches across different domains.
Mm-hmm. I see. Yes.
I think there's a huge potential for Gen AI, and we're also currently using Gen AI. As a ministry, what we do is produce text, so that's what it's made for. It's relatively low risk, high impact value, so I think that's definitely there in the public administration. I think it's a bit different when it comes to agents. We don't have the technical maturity yet, we don't have the governance yet, and we don't have trust frameworks yet. So I'm a bit skeptical. I think we need to really move forward technical data AI maturity in the public administration to successfully employ AI agents. And on a side note, I mean, in the public administration, most of our processes are rule-based. So I think we can already leverage a lot of efficiency by digital transformation. I think, yes, potentially we do need to move towards agentic AI, but on the short term, digital transformation has a bigger leverage.
I see. How is it with you?
Yeah, I fully agree. I think what is very often left out is it will be always a mixture of rule-based, so classic automation and agents. I think that's going to be probably the standard. And there's a lot of homework to do. Yeah, how do you do roles and rights? A lot of protocols now starting to implement at MCP, for example, but there's still a way to go. Still, I believe, because you ask, is it hype? might sound crazy, but I believe it's still underhyped. I think the potential is huge. It's really huge, and it's much bigger than we can imagine today. So it will take time, I think probably more time than we wish for at the moment to leverage those efficiencies, but they will come.
Interesting. What do you think about it?
I agree. You know, I mean, automation is rule-based. Automation also means interoperability. Yeah, a very boring data topic that, again, you know, needs love and attention. And then, as you say, for certain processes, you know, sophisticated prediction, sophisticated decision support, sophisticated creation, you want to leverage AI, but and it allows entirely new use cases, right? That's the beauty, and that's where I think the huge potential comes from. But you know, let's always keep calm and start with basic means, because then your cost-benefit ratio of your data product is probably better than if you go big immediately.
Interesting. Thank you, all of you. Yes, it seems that this kind of the combination of these two, of the kind of more rule-based and the more not so rule-based systems, they could work well together. Maybe as a last round, looking at the clock, it's something we've spoken about a bit now, but maybe to broaden it a bit, because we've been having this panel for 3 years now. I wonder, of course, what maybe we might be talking about next year. Whoever will sit next year here and interview you, I wonder what will be the topic or the headline next year. Because last year we were talking about Gen AI, and this year we have a more data product AI kind of focused. Do you have any idea where this will go? Which issues, which topics might be run into next year, or in the years to come? There's plenty of things that I've heard now that need a lot of attention, as you said, rightfully so. What is your kind of top of mind, maybe, for the time to come?
Difficult question. Maybe I go first, and then you correct me. Yeah.
4 people, 5 answers.
Yeah,
I would say.
Agent will certainly play a big role, I would assume, and sort of agents of agents. So you mentioned MCP. How do agents interact? I don't believe in one agent ruling the entire enterprise, but an army of agents. That's certainly one topic. And I would hope for that for Europe, we manage to really combine AI and agent with sort of our industry know-how. So Gen AI built into hardware, and then sold to our clients around the world. I think this is where our industry can really profit in manufacturing, for instance, building these edge devices, using AI, having AI on the edge, and selling that broadly.
Thank you. Who's next?
I think maybe we can talk about how AI can take over all the tedious work, all the data governance. You talked about labeling and data quality, and that's all the tasks that's really the foundational work for successful data products, AI products. So I'm really hopeful that AI can do that in the future for us. So maybe that's a topic for next year. And then also, of course, sovereignty. Already touched on it. That we have good, competitive European AI solutions.
We haven't spoken about sovereignty on this. So, who's next?
Yeah, maybe adding to what Max said, I think this leap over into the physical world, that's going to be something we were talking about. World models already on the horizon. So I think that will be something. And maybe completely different topic, I think what we probably should talk about a lot is the people using AI and what it does with us as a I think really in our private lives, but of course also in our work life, how it changes a lot in our day-to-day lives. I think that will be a topic which will come up more and more.
I'm a huge, I'm volunteering 2 topics here. One is bringing all of those best practices which exist from non-personal data to personal data, because we see this pendulum swing from previously, oh, this is GDPR, don't touch it, to we can't afford to not touch it, for example, in healthcare. And you see the European Health Data Space, you see in Germany the Gesundheitsdatennutzungsgesetz, so the Healthcare Data Use Act. So there is now a desire to bring those best practices to personal data. And when mentioning regulation, I'm personally extremely interested in what the EU Data Act will bring. which some people call the GDPR of non-personal data, and how in interesting three-way partnerships, data that was previously not accessible is suddenly accessible and will create new business opportunities for smart players, and also potential disadvantages for potentially incumbents. So I think that's another topic I'm proposing for next year.
Cool. Thank you, all of you. Super interesting. I really enjoyed the conversation with you. Thank you. This is your applause. Thank you.
Thank you.